Hey friends, I hope last weekend you had an awesome Easter. Hope that time was filled with just being able to celebrate and reflect on the victory that Jesus has and the power that just brings to our lives and uh, just what that means through our lens as Christians. What an awesome day to celebrate. And growing up for me, Easter was always met with extended family time. And so for those of you that maybe didn't get that time, maybe it's different right now with social distancing. I totally recognize that, and it's a huge bummer. But I hope you were able to find some time, maybe to call some extended family, people that you usually see, or reach out to some friends and just talk about that celebration, and also just kind of check in and catch up with how they're doing during this time. So family's kind of already on the mind, right? Family with Easter for me has those things are just those things just pair up so well. And we're actually going to be talking about family this week and the next few weeks, and what a normal family looks like, right? And so a typical family, if you will. And we're also going to talk about an atypical family, a family that maybe isn't super normal. All right, and maybe you're already thinking about people in your current family or maybe extended family that aren't the most normal, right? So you're thinking maybe like second or third cousin at this point. Maybe it's that crazy uncle. Maybe you don't have somebody like that, and you just know of somebody else's family with some crazy relatives and stuff like that. And I think all of us kind of get to a point in our life. Maybe it's just kind of growing up as kids, or maybe it's through the teenage years where we just kind of wonder to ourselves, is my family weird? Is my family normal? Is my family exciting or fun? Is my family boring? Like, I think that these are all questions that we wrestle with, and maybe you don't wrestle with those, but maybe just for the majority of us, we're just kind of over here looking at families that we see. Maybe it's our best friend's family, maybe it's family members that we see from teammates or band friends or neighbors, where we just kind of look in on their lives and it's like, that's a lot different than mine. They look so normal, or they're always nice, or something like that. Maybe we see those families on TV. Maybe we see those in shows on Netflix or cable. We're just watching a family just kind of live it up, and we're just like looking and just thinking of all the ways that is nothing like anything we've experienced, right? That they look so functional, or they're really funny, or it's just always exciting. There's always something going on, when our family might be boring or something like that. So we're not harping on families at all, but we're just kind of recognizing that maybe all of us go through a point where we sit back and reflect on our family and just come up with a question of like, what is a normal family? And so we've used these guides of other people's families as influences, or shows that are showing us kind of what a family model looks like, and kind of family relations in different situations, that writers on TV shows and producers create up just for us to follow along and chew some popcorn in as we kind of gaze upon this story unfolding. So with all those things being said, we're going to talk about some families, and the Bible obviously has a lot of families in it, and it has stories, and we know a lot of really great families, and we also know some families that aren't doing exceptional. We know some families that are struggling, and we know some families that are really dysfunctional, right? Some families that maybe there are some moments where we're like, that's us, all right? And within the first few chapters of the Bible, within Genesis, chapters 3 and 4, we already see a family that is kind of reeling based off of some like really big mistakes that they have, okay? So we are going to talk about Adam and Eve first. And in Genesis chapter 3, we see kind of their big mistake, right? We see some dysfunction, we see some problems, and some pretty big mistakes that they make, all right? So God has created this perfect place, and he has created Adam and Eve individually, and they're just kind of living life, and they're married, and they're wandering around, and they've really got one rule, okay? There's just one rule, and it's like, hey, just don't mess this up, all right? Don't eat of this specific tree, okay? All right, so we're going to read a little bit about that and what goes on there. All right, the problems that unfold. All right, this is Genesis 3, verses 1 through 6. So Genesis chapter 3, verse 1 through 6. All right. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die." "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened. All right, and we're going to stop right there for a second. So this serpent, this kind of evil creature, this enemy of us, right? Satan is hanging out in the garden, and he sees this tree, and he just starts to nudge, and he just plants this idea that hey, you could probably eat it. You're not going to die from it. No, that's nonsense. When this is the one rule that they had, don't eat from this tree. So they do it, right? They eat from this tree. She eats the fruit first. Adam is right there. He's been there with her, and he eats the fruit from this tree as well. And immediately, there's a big mistake, right? Not only do they just disobey God, their creator, the ruler of the universe, but they allowed sin into this place of harmony. They allowed sin into this garden where they got to freely walk with God, and where they had all this beauty and just a vibrant life abiding with Him in such a cool way. And here this serpent just kind of slithers in, plants some lies, and they sin in a really big way, and thus opening the door for all humanity, that now sin is there. All right, sin is on the table for everyone now, and that's our nature now, is we are filled and we are broken immediately, and we are sinful beings, and that's who we are for the rest of our lives under our power. That's who we are. And so God realizes this, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about what happens with that, okay? So we're gonna jump ahead, and then we're gonna backtrack a little bit because Adam and Eve obviously have some problems here. They have some issues, but the family expands, all right, and unfortunately the problems persist, and the sin continues just to kind of run rampant in their family. All right, so moving to Genesis chapter 4, we're gonna read through verse 8. All right, so Genesis 4, verse 1 through 8. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. Cain and Abel are their two children, Adam and Eve. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord, and Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, and you must rule over it." Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Super heavy stuff right there. But there's kind of a list of sins, a list of characteristics there that are leading to this thing, right? So Cain and Abel, they bring sacrifices to God with this sin culture now. And being sinful beings, we're now sacrificing pure things. We're sacrificing good things to God in this point in the Bible to kind of cleanse us, right? And so Abel brings just the best of the best. He brings his A game, and Cain doesn't. Cain just brings some stuff, but he doesn't bring the best. All right, and so God just sees favor on Abel. He says, "Wow, this is awesome," and he takes that well. And Cain is getting pretty jealous in the background, and so now Cain's doing two things: is he's just trying to kind of front that this is my best, and when it's not. He's now really jealous and angry, and God even calls him out on it. And God sees him so downcast and asks him about it. And he even warns him about sin, and he warns him that that can creep in, that it wants to just kind of devour him and just kind of overtake him. And Cain invites Abel out into the field, and from there commits the first recorded murder. All right, so this family's resume right now is riddled with a lot of darkness, a lot of brokenness, a lot of hurting people, and we have the people that literally brought sin into this world, and we have their son who committed the first murder, right? And if we're looking and from maybe the vantage point of hearing these kind of stories of dysfunctional families and families where just really bad things happen on the news or something like that, people that we hear about, we just sit back and wonder, like, well, how could that get better? Or is that the end of their story? And thankfully, this isn't the end of their story. And that Adam and Eve and that Cain and Abel, that's not just the end of their story. That God has really big plans for them, okay? And so, backtracking, just back to Genesis chapter 3, we're looking at verse 15. And so, God has this plan, and God knows that this is all gonna happen and play out. And the serpent, in this perfect kind of relationship with Adam and Eve and God, just the serpent kind of looking into and onto their relationship is like, this is the way that I can divide them, and this is the way that I can separate them. And he's like, I'm going to use the one rule that God set up and established. I'm going to use that against them. And so he does his thing, right? He does his bidding. They eat the fruit of the forbidden tree. They are now opened up to sin, the knowledge of good and evil. Now they know it, and they can't just put it back, right? It's there for good. And so the serpent at this point, I would imagine, is feeling pretty good. The serpent is thinking the one thing that they had to remember, I convinced them it wasn't that important, and now all these problems are occurring now. Their relationship is now severed. It's hurting. It's broken. And here I am, just kind of reeling on the fact that I was able to do that. But God actually uses the serpent's action in this to line out how He's going to fix this problem. So in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, He says, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." All right, and so the serpent is pretty much celebrating this fact of, like, look what I got this family to do. And God's like, well, that's not the end of their story. And you know what? I'm actually going to use this family, the one that you're so excited about, the one that you think you have corrupted and ruined completely. I'm actually going to use this problem. I'm going to use their sin. I'm going to use these two people that are broken. I'm going to use that to literally defeat you. I'm going to use that to break you. And so from this family is going to be, it's going to be a long time, right? Generations after generations after generations. The lineage, though, of Adam and Eve is going to produce Jesus. All right, and Jesus being, like, already lined out here, that Jesus is going to be Adam and Eve's offspring, and that He's going to come from her, and He will crush your head. God talking to the serpent there, that He's going to crush the enemy, and He is going to just sort of reign into that glory and victory over this sin problem. And so this problem, this setup where the serpent kind of won the day, God flips it upside down, God throws a curveball and is using that to then restore humanity, restore that relationship, restore the sin problem. And as we just celebrated last week with Easter, that's it, right? So we just kind of got to the end, and so now we're looking at the prequel, right? The prequel to the prequel, really, because it's pretty early on in creation and in the Bible. But how cool is that God would use the poster family for dysfunction, right? That He would use them to ultimately bring Jesus on to the scene. And there's a lot of people in between, right? And there's a lot of people that are really good. And there's a lot of people that aren't so good, that come onto the scene through this lineage as Jesus makes his way down to earth through Mary and Joseph, and the miracle of that, which is so cool. And so as we look at this first family, as we look at this family that really had no business being involved in this story in such a cool way, we see God using a family that's super dysfunctional to do incredible things, even when it didn't look like they were trying. And so what would it look like if we were trying? And what would it look like if we weren't the normal American family? We weren't the typical, what would that look like if we were atypical? And so we're going to be talking about what it might look like to be atypical, what it might be, what it might look like to be that family that isn't the norm, that family that is different, but that family that's sold out and dedicated to Jesus and the promise that He brings to that. So over the next few weeks, that's what we're going to be talking about. And on Tuesday night, we're going to have a discussion time on Zoom. We've been using GroupMe for a while now, but Tuesday at 6 o'clock, we are going to be using Zoom for the first time as we look over kind of our discussion time. With that being said, we're going to put some reminders out on social media of that, and we're going to send out that link in an email. If you're not a part of our email subscription, feel free to DM our social media accounts. Feel free to reach out for that link so you guys can get on to that Zoom call. All right, so Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock p.m., that's when we're going to be jumping into this discussion. Guys, I hope you guys have the best week. Take care, stay safe, and remember that even if your family's a little crazy at times, that we're going to try to be atypical during this season where you guys spend a lot of time together, all right? Take care.